backstory. And for me, that backstory is, how did it happen? Who made it happen? How'd they do it? I know the backstory with Richard Childress, and I know the desire, the dedication, and the determination that got him to where he's at today. You know, Richard and I go back, and Greg ruined half of my stuff here, but Richard and I go back about 50 some odd years. It seems like just yesterday that we were right up at Bowman Gray Stadium, selling peanuts and popcorn in the grandstands, hanging around in the pit area when the race was over, getting our NASCAR fix that we needed. And we always had something in common. You know, both of us from the south side of Winston-Salem. We didn't have a whole lot. We didn't need a whole lot. Richard would meet at Bowman Gray Stadium. We'd sell programs in the grandstands, do whatever we had to do just to be around racing, just to be a part of it. Both of us raced a little bit. When I say both of us, Richard continued. I started out and I made a step forward and maybe 2 steps back. Richard made a step and then another step and another step. We ended up, and I love to tell these stories because these are pretty unbelievable, pretty incredible stories. 1969, Richard Childress went to Daytona Beach to race. Asked me if I'd go with him. Loaded up, Richard and I went to Daytona. We stayed in a camper at Orange Isle Campground that you could pull behind a Volkswagen. It was very tiny. We went to the racetrack, did all the things we needed to do, and back in those days, when you went to the racetrack, you had people that would give you stuff. Engine oil, STP, t-shirts, parts, pieces. We had never been around any of that in our life. They loaded us up. We had cases of oil, we had STP, we had t-shirts, we had everything. We raced that day. Richard qualified real well and ran really good. First time in the big leagues. Had a problem, got out of the race. We loaded up. We decided to come home early that day. So another guy here in town, he's passed away now, Ernie Shaw. Ernie was another one of the racers back in the day. And to get the car there, we used Ernie's truck because Ernie had a car, Richard had a car. We kind of teamed up, we all went together. So Richard and I were going to come back early Saturday afternoon when the race was over, and we're going to drive that old truck. Thank God it rained, because I think before we got to Jacksonville, it was running hot. We were dipping water out of the side ditch and putting it in the truck. We used every can of our free engine oil we had. We used every can of STP. We used everything we could. And by the way, and I don't know if Richard remembers this or not, I had a belt. And this little truck would jump out of gear, jump out of high gear, and I took my belt off and tied it around the seat, would pull it back in high gear, and I'd loop the belt over and keep it in gear. I saw that truck, it must have been 10 years later in a junkyard, and I looked at it, and my belt was still in. By the way, we come back from Daytona. We weren't through. Richard asked me again, hey, I'm going to go to Richmond. You want to go with us? Or not with us, with me? Sure. Richard, by that time, had got himself a truck. Wasn't much better than the one we had, just to be quite honest with you. I'm going to tell you why here in just a few minutes. We drive to Richmond. Now, we had a young intern working at RCR earlier this year, and I was trying to tell him a few things about life, and I said, son, I know that you think the interstates have always been here, but that one out there has only been here about 10 years. The other ones haven't been here that long. Went to Richmond, by the way, 95, that's what I'm trying to get to, was not open at the time. But anyway, we go to Richmond, Virginia. Richard had an old truck, had a couple of ramps welded on the back of it, maybe a toolbox, a couple of tires, car on the back of it. We go to Richmond, Virginia. Right when we get into the racetrack, we're getting ready to go in. Motor blows up. We go into the racetrack. We unload the car. Richard Childress raced that day. Did a pretty daggone good job with what we had. Got through racing. He said, I need you to do me a favor. Now, Richard and I are pretty close at the same age, but I was right out of high school. Richard had been out of school for a few years. Richard said, I need you to do me a favor. I have got to go to work in the morning. I cannot afford to have something happen in my job. Richard worked at Douglas Battery, right here in Winston-Salem. Richard got a ride home that night, went to Douglas Battery, worked all day long the next day, got off of work, went and borrowed another truck, drove back to Richmond, Virginia, got there about midnight. Now, he borrowed another truck, and it was a pretty good sized truck. So we load the truck with the car on the back of it, on the back of the other truck. Now, we don't measure to see if it's going to go under the bridges. We don't have a clue. But we come home. And we came home and we went over to Devo Street where Richard lived, Richard and Judy. By the way, let me go on, and this is in my notes, but let me say this. Judy Childress and Tina, the only two people that actually worked for Richard Childress, or they worked together. It was a family operation, and they ran it out of the house there on Devo Street. But anyway, we got back to Devo Street with the truck, with the car. Okay? I've told this story for 30 some odd years, and pretty hard to believe story, you know. A lot of stories you hear in racing are fabricated stories and people add to them. I work really hard to make sure that all my stories are the exact truth, and I really, really do. And that one is the exact truth. But we had told that story for about 30 years. We built a new race shop there in Welcome, and I invite any of you to come see the race shop and the museum. And by the way, the winery and vineyards is about 5 miles down the road. If you've not been there, you don't know what you're missing. It's really a great place to come visit. But when we got ready to do the race shop, they decorated, and Judy found a picture. And that picture today is in the lobby of the Richard Childress Racing, the race shop. And it's a picture of the truck in front of the house there on Devo Street. And a lot of people come in and they look around and they go, man, where did Richard get his money? Pretty simple. Desire, dedication, determination. This is a guy that's at work about 7 days a week. Judy, same, she's there as well. They have dedicated their life to the business there at Richard Childress. I go back and tell you that it was just a family operation. We have over 500 employees there now. I looked up something the other day that kind of shocked me. Richard Childress Racing, we have raced over 1 million miles. We have over 200 victories there at Richard Childress Racing, and all of that is through the hard work and the leadership of your speaker that's coming up, and that is Richard Childress. It's an honor to be here to introduce him tonight. When you can introduce your friend, your boss, and your hero at the same time, that's pretty good stuff. So, Richard, your turn.
Thank you. I'm going to have to bring a little water up here, a little dry. Drink a little wine and we're still here, still awake. But man, what a great evening, great place to have a, sorry about that, I'm not coordinating quite yet. You know, and what a great evening to be here this evening and hear the stories. But first off, I can't let Chocolate get out without me telling a story or two on him. He told someone me. But you know, that'd take too long to really tell the big ones. But you know, I had a lady that asked me the other day, she said, does Chocolate Meyer still work for you? I said, well, I still pay him. The other thing was when, way back when we like he's one of my best friends, always has been, always will be. Way back when, I said, Chocolate, if you come to work for me, I can't pay you, but I'll make you famous someday. Well, I hadn't paid him a lot since, but he's done pretty good. He's a radio star, more famous than most all the race drivers out there. So, Chocolate, thank you for being a friend and everything you've done for RCR and so many things in our sport. And Greg Johns, sorry, but I got to get you one. 3 and 4, couldn't you put me at 5 or 7 or 2 or 15?